in my mind, I was going home with you. If you're wondering why he's not calling you back, or why he texts you but he doesn't actually make any effort to hang out with you, it's because you blew it on the first date. I hate to break it to you, but the fact of the matter is something went wrong on that first hangout, that first meetup, whatever it is. Something went wrong, he didn't like what he saw, and that's why he's not talking to you. The other thing is he's probably talking to multiple people, and whatever he didn't like on your encounter is why he feels like the other person's a priority. A lot of people forget that the first date is actually the first impression. So even though you might be super excited about things, being excited about the date is probably also your biggest downfall, because it makes you not really receptive to what's actually happening, to reality. Instead, you're just going to perceive the situation however you think it's going in your head. So you might not even realize that it's going poorly, but you think that they're super into you because you're so into them that you don't realize these little mistakes that you're making. I'm speaking from experience. I'm not even saying this is just trying to be like, to bust anybody's chops or anything. But when I started dating again, and this is after I was in a 10-year relationship, I went out with this guy, and it was the first time that I was really into a guy since being, like, I was literally engaged. I've actually been engaged a couple of times. I don't like telling people that because it makes it seem like I'm the problem. Maybe I am, but yeah, I've been engaged a couple of times. So needless to say, I was in a really long relationship, and the last person that I had been with before going on this date with this guy, I was engaged to, and it was a 10-year thing. So I hadn't dated in at least 10 years. But I was excited to go out with this guy because I hadn't been excited or really attracted to anybody like that since being with my ex. So leading up to the date, we're talking all day, every day. And we're texting, and we're just talking about how excited we are to see each other. And we actually weren't supposed to see each other that night. It wasn't supposed to be until the next week, but he came back into town off of a business trip early. So he's like, oh my God, I'd really love to see you. Can we meet up tonight instead? I don't want to wait until next week. And so I cleared some things in my schedule and I made time to see him. And honestly, everything was amazing. We went to one of my favorite sushi spots, and he was really hot. I'm not gonna lie, he was really hot. He was also fit, which was something that I missed in my ex. He also had a full head of hair, which is something I missed from my ex. And basically, it just felt like, okay, all the pain and suffering I had just gone through with my breakup, suddenly it felt like there's a silver lining here. Like, I just met this guy, and now all of the pain that I've gone through, it feels like this was the reason. So my perception of everything was just that everything was amazing. And honestly, I'm just gonna be frank, after all that, and after not being with somebody for so long, I was just really excited to have sex again. Just to have first time sex with somebody that I was actually attracted to, because I had been with someone for so long and I hadn't been with very many people anyway. And so I'm sure part of it was my hormones, which is what made me so excited. But basically, the date, nothing bad happened, you know? Nothing went wrong. But when we were on the date, we started to talk about our past relationships and like how long we'd been single for, and just talking about ourselves. And these are things that you want to do when you're on a date when you really like someone, because you just feel like they're already seeing the best version of you, and so you want to be honest and you want to let them into this world because you already have such a good mentality and mind space about them. So what ends up happening is I end up oversharing. And at the time I didn't see it as oversharing because he asked, you know, like, what happened? And I was like, oh, okay, well, the thing is, I was actually in a 10-year relationship. And he's like, oh, okay, wow. And he tells me that his longest relationship, it was years ago, and it was only for like 7 or 8 months or something. It was less than a year, maybe a year. He might have said a year just because he was intimidated by the fact that I was in a 10-year relationship, because like, that's huge to hear that. Looking looking back on it now, it makes me cringe because I'm kind of like, that was probably the first part of the downfall. And so we keep talking and we just kind of talk about why the relationships didn't work out. And I guess he asked me something about like, did I see it? Like, you know, like, why did you stay with somebody for that long, but you guys didn't get married? And then I told him, well, actually, we were engaged, and 2 months before my wedding, I actually called it off. Like, and this is true, like 2 months before the wedding, I just realized that, you know, fundamentally, we just didn't align. And the direction that my life was going with him, it was like everything that I was as an individual, all the best parts of me that I thought I had, were just gonna die the second I became Mrs. X's last name. Because if you think about it, that's kind of what happens when you're a woman. It's like that identity that you had, even as a man, yes, but the identity you have as a single woman kind of dies because you take on this person's last name. You basically become the version of whatever this person wanted you to be where they asked you to marry them. And the thought of that just made me really depressed because I felt like he wasn't a very ambitious person, whereas I was, and I was compromising on a lot of those things to just make myself feel like it was going to be okay, giving up on a lot of my dreams and things that I enjoyed to be with him. Anyway, so long story short, I tell him that I was engaged. Clearly it's another bombshell for him, but I'm not really perceiving it that way. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm just being honest, whatever. And he's like, oh wow, okay, that's huge. And then he starts to ask me what happened. And I just sort of start to tell him a little bit about my situation. And I just, when I tell you how much I was oversharing, I just said a lot about like personality things about my ex that I didn't need to talk about. And so after like 20 minutes, I felt drained energetically, but not in a good way. I literally felt bad because I felt like I dumped all of this trauma that I had been feeling in my last relationship on this perfectly handsome, pretty much stranger that I met in hopes that it was gonna go somewhere and ease the burden and the pain that I'd been feeling from my breakup, which wasn't fair on my part. After the date, we head back and we're in the car, and like in my mind, I was going home with him. Like I had made that decision. I was going to go home with this guy. It had been so long. I needed to get over my ex, and that's what was going down. We get to his house. Like I parked my car like in his garage. In the car, you know, I'm just kind of waiting for him to like kiss me and stuff so we could initiate the point where he asked me to come in. And he's like not really kissing me the same way he did. At this point, like, you know, I'd made up my mind and stuff about how the night was gonna end. And like, I could tell he wasn't feeling it. And so he's just like, you know, I'm actually just gonna go inside. I'm really tired and I have to get up early the next day. And I was like, oh, okay. And in my mind, I thought everything went great. So I was just like, okay, cool. Like, that's fine. He's probably trying to be respectful and, you know, whatever it is you tell yourself when you're not getting what you want at the end. He told me to text him when I got home, and I did. And like the last week or two, every time I would text him, like it would be another 20, 30 minutes of just texting before I fell asleep. And he was just like, liked it. End of the conversation. And then the next day, he didn't really text me good morning. And as I'm talking to him throughout the day, it was just like the energy was cold. Like I didn't really feel that he was reciprocating the energy at all. And so later in the day, I just kind of asked him, I was like, hey, what's up? Like, I just feel like, you know, you're just like a little more out of touch or something. Like, what happened? And he basically was like, you know, I think you're really beautiful and you're awesome, but I just don't think that you're over your ex. And in my mind, I'm like, no. I'm completely over it. Like, it should have ended 2 years before it did. Whatever, saying every excuse I possibly can through text message, mind you, which is just like annoying to do. And he's like, and honestly, from what you were saying, it sounds like your ex and I are very similar. And I just don't think that like in the long run, we would connect. I don't think that I could make you happy or like, you know, fill the void of like something long term. And my mindset was that I was not looking for anything else long term. I had just gotten out of a 10-year relationship. So my mind was on something else. I gotta wrap it up because I have to leave for work. He basically lets me down and is like, yeah, I don't think your ex and I have anything. Like, I think your ex and I have too much in common. I don't think that you would be happy, all this stuff. stuff that you say to somebody when you want a serious relationship, but I was not about having a serious relationship at all. And I kind of know now because at the time it seemed like all the dates I'd gone on, I wasn't looking for anything serious, but everyone else was. And so that was kind of a deal breaker for them. In hindsight, I appreciate it because after my breakup, I was really trying to be this version of myself that I'm just not. And I think that ultimately it was just God protecting me from that kind of a lifestyle because it's just not for me. And so it was very disappointing. I literally was serving it up on a platter and he wanted nothing to do with it, which was just another blow because I was still grieving my relationship. Ultimately, it was a good thing because he was very similar to my ex and I wasn't over my ex at the time. So it wouldn't have been fair to do that to him. But also for me, I would have just fallen back into this same pattern of trying to be somebody else to fit into the mold of someone who honestly just isn't on my level for what I'm asking for. That was our first official date and I blew it. I didn't think that I blew it at the time. I thought everything was great because my perception was just that, yeah, guys just want to get laid, like whatever it is, that's kind of what I'm trying to do anyway because I've never done that before. I was like, I've never been like a sexy single mommy like with that sort of intention before. So the prospect of it was exciting to me, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. And then literally the next guy that I hang out with, it was somebody that I was friends with for a while and that ended up being my boyfriend. In hindsight, it was just a reminder that sometimes you want something to work out so badly that you're wearing rose-colored glasses. You didn't even realize that you ruined their impression of you on the first date by being too vulnerable, whatever it is. And you never know what it is that kind of keeps somebody out. My energy was too heavy. I was coming from a place of pain and grief, and I was looking for a silver lining or a band-aid for that. And that's why it didn't work out. Everyone always says, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. Well, you can be yourself, but sometimes if yourself is not energetically aligned for a relationship or to like welcome in a new positive, healthy energy or whatever it is, or if that person is not a person who is going to provide that for you, like energetically, something is going to protect you and keep that person out of your life or protect them, vice versa. So if the vibe's not there, that's okay. Just accept that it didn't work out and move on. But don't do that thing where you're trying to text them and reach out to them and trying to make something work that's just ultimately not going to. That's my story about how I had a really great first date that ultimately went nowhere.